last time we got together, we started talking about the history of Nelson County. And part of what I say today is going to be of most interest to those of you who live at Wintergreen, but it will also likely be of interest to others as well, because we're going to start talking about the love of the land and the history of Wintergreen. And whatever I say today, it'll be brief, but if you want more information, and if you live here, you should definitely have this book. And you can order it online to Nature Foundation. This is a book that we did several years ago. The author is Mary Buford Hitz, and we had 5 of the original founders sitting around the table, fighting like the gingham dog and the calico cat, I might add, as we put this book together. But it's accurate. So the last time we were together, we talked about Nelson County and how it formed out of the preceding counties that were much bigger. And we got to the point where we started to talk about the big survey, which is the map here, the 10,000 acres. It makes up most of Wintergreen today. And we talked about the owners of that a little bit. But I thought it might be interesting to talk just a little bit about how Wintergreen got its name. And Wintergreen got its name from the old plantation house that was built in the late 1700s, had an insurance policy on it by 1802. And this now stands almost ghost-like up on the bank as you pass the little hamlet of Wintergreen in the valley. It's on the west side of 151. Wintergreen, probably the best place to start in terms of the community today is to start in 1968 when a man named Bill Maddox from Durham, North Carolina, contacted Don Faulkner, or Don Faulkner was subsequently contacted, about a piece of land that was 10,000 acres that Mr. Maddox, sort of a timber baron, wanted to sell. And Don Faulkner spent 3 years studying Wintergreen, trying to decide the best use for this beautiful piece of land. You have to understand that Nelson County in those days, 1968, it was a real sort of backwater. It was, the population was less than 20,000 people. I remember right, it was like 10 or 11,000 people. I can't remember the exact number. But this was a happy hunting ground for a lot of locals, and it had been lightly timbered, but not strip cut. And it was an incredibly beautiful piece of land. You know, 10,000 acres is 8 or 9 square miles, and a big piece of property. So Don spent about 3 years studying this property, and this is all in the book. And there was a black man named George Best who walked with him and who knew the local lore and helped him with placement on the map. So 3 years later, he approached a man named Jim Wheat of Wheat First Securities in Richmond. Later became Wheat Butcher Singer, I think. And Jim Wheat got really interested in Wintergreen. And the interesting thing is that Jim Wheat, who was a great visionary, was blind. So one of the chapters of the book is the visionary and the blind man with vision. So Jim and Doug Faulkner were working on this. And by 1971, a deal was put together where all of the big survey, which is most of Wintergreen today, was agreed. There was an agreed upon sale price of $1.4 million. Probably about the amount that 2 view lots on Devil's Knob sold for some years ago. And Jim Wheat put together an investment company called BLM, and they subsequently began to look for a developer to sell this land to. And the developer was Cabot, Cabot & Forbes, which was a New England firm. And Cabot, Cabot & Forbes did another survey that lasted several years. And by 1973, they had agreed to purchase and develop Wintergreen. Meanwhile, as all this was going on, you can only imagine what the officials in Nelson County were thinking about all this. They'd never heard anything like this. I mean, Wintergreen a ski resort development in the middle of a backwater Nelson County. It took a lot of good groundwork by Don Faulkner, L.F. Payne, who came later with Cabot Forbes, to convince the county that this was a good thing to do. So as this began to happen, around 1974, Cabot Forbes had bought it. In 1974, those of you that are of the generation remember that there was the Arab oil embargo. Well, there was something that happened before that. As Don Faulkner was looking at Wintergreen and trying to figure out how to develop it, Hurricane Camille hit. This was 1969. And what a tragedy that was. 1% of the county population was lost. But that's another story in itself. By 1973, after Cabot Forbes had bought the property, there was the oil embargo. And many of you may remember the even odd days and the gas lines and all of this. So at any rate, the people who were surveying Wintergreen now, Cabot Forbes, they were designing the ski slopes and had consultants in and so forth. And part of their success was also dependent upon selling lots. And you can imagine that people maybe coming from Washington, D.C. here were listening to a dream of future ski resorts and tennis courts and golf courses. And there was nothing here. There was a dirt road that came up the mountain. But what really sold Wintergreen in those days was the nature of this place. People would come in and they would be taken out to places like the Plunge and Smoking Falls and all these places. And they'd fall in love with it. So in the first portion, the early days, it was the nature of Wintergreen that was selling. And we like to believe at the foundation that is still what sells Wintergreen. It's still the most important piece. And due to the efforts of a lot of individuals, this original vision and this original dream has been kept alive. So it's an important piece. This was followed by chapters of how to get a road up the mountain, which was extremely difficult. There were many times when other communities that were started around this time went bankrupt 3 or 4 times. Wintergreen managed to hold on through the efforts of L.F. Payne and other good leadership, Gary Green and many others. And by 1974, a road was put up the mountain. And as time went on, guests were able to come here. There were Jeep trips that went around and took people to different places, selling Wintergreen. Somewhere along in this period of time, the locals, who many of whom were really not in favor of Wintergreen, set an administration building on fire and burned it to the ground. Another chapter. But all of these pieces notwithstanding, Wintergreen began to develop. The first condominiums were built. The Mountain Inn Center was starting to get built, the Mountain Inn, which incidentally, we talked about archaeology. That Mountain Inn Center, and what's check-in today, was built on a site that man had chosen as a favorite site for 10,000 years. It's probably one of the richest archaeological sites on the mountain. So who knows how much we spent to design that site, but I got news for you. Man had chosen that site for 10,000 years. As time went on, the first condos were built, and the first ski season, which was a soft open, happened in 1975, the fall of 1975. So we're going to stop there, and the next time we're together, we'll talk about the next chapter. So we hope you'll join us, because Wintergreen is a very unique place, and this is a very special story. So if you're a property owner, landowner, you need to have the book on your coffee table. That's sort of the instruction manual for Wintergreen. Best to you. We miss you. Thank you.